Hello, back again on the Top Recap channel. This time I will tell a movie's entitled The Shawshank Redemption. Let's get straight into the storyline. The story begins in 1947. Banker Andy Dufresne is convicted of murdering his wife and her lover, despite maintaining his innocence. Since the state of Maine has no death penalty, he receives 2 life sentences and is sent to the tough Shawshank prison. His cold and distant demeanor leads others to believe he's guilty. Ellis Boyd Redding, a longtime inmate serving 20 years, is denied parole once again. Known as someone who can smuggle items into the prison, Red has a tradition of betting on which new inmate will break down on their first night. He bets on Andy, but loses when another prisoner, nicknamed Fat Ass, has a breakdown and is savagely beaten by guard Byron Hadley.
Trustees, take that tub of shit down to the infirmary.
The inmate later dies in the infirmary. Andy quietly asks for the man's name, but is brushed off by the others.
Doesn't fucking matter what his name was, he's dead.
A month later, Andy approaches Red and asks for a rock hammer to pursue his hobby of carving stones. Red agrees, but warns him about the Sisters, a violent group of inmates led by Box. While others continue to see Andy as cold and aloof, Red is struck by his quiet determination.
10 it is.
At first, he suspects Andy may use the hammer to escape, but laughs it off after seeing how small it is, clearly too small to dig through prison walls. During his first 2 years, Andy suffers frequent assaults from his sisters. He resists as best he can, but is often beaten and raked. He never speaks of the abuse. When a rooftop work detail is announced, Red uses his connections to get Andy and their group assigned to it, a welcome break from prison routine. While working, Andy overhears Hadley complaining about the taxes on an inheritance.
Uncle Sam. He puts his hand in your shirt and squeezes your tit till it's purple.
Drawing on his financial knowledge, Andy offers to help him legally protect the money in exchange for cold beers for the crew.
I only asked 3 beers apiece for each of my co-workers.
Though initially threatened, Hadley agrees, and the prisoners enjoy cold beers on the roof. Red believes Andy's gesture was less about the beer and more about earning the guards' favor, and maybe, for a moment, feeling human again. Later, Andy surprises Red by asking for a large poster of actress Rita Hayworth.
No, I wanted to save that.
Not long after, Andy is once again attacked by the Sisters and ends up hospitalized for a month. In retaliation, Hadley and his guards brutally beat Box, leaving him paralyzed.
No!
He is then transferred to another prison, and Andy is left alone from the north.
Sisters never laid a finger on Andy again. And Boggs never walked again.
Upon returning from the infirmary, Andy finds sculpting rocks and the Rita Hayworth poster in his cell, gifts from Red and the others. Warden Norton learns of Andy's financial expertise and has his cell searched under the pretense of an inspection. During the search, Andy is reading his Bible, and the two exchange favorite verses.
Always like that one.
Before leaving, the warden cryptically tells him, "Salvation lies within," and hands the Bible back.
Ties Andy up.
Andy is reassigned to work in the prison library alongside an elderly inmate named Brooks Hatlin. However, it's soon clear that the library job is a cover. Andy has become the prison's unofficial financial advisor, helping guards manage their taxes and money. His reputation spreads, and guards from other prisons come seeking his help. Even Warden Norton begins using Andy's services to launder money under the guise of a fake prison work program. Meanwhile, Andy starts writing weekly letters to the state senate, requesting funds to improve the prison library. Meanwhile, Brooks, terrified of the outside world after decades behind bars, threatens fellow inmate Haywood in a desperate attempt to avoid parole. Andy steps in to calm him down.
Get down.
Red explains that after spending 50 years in Shawshank, Brooks has become institutionalized, so used to prison life that he can no longer adapt to the outside world. After being paroled, Brooks struggles to adjust in a halfway house and at a supermarket job. Overwhelmed and hopeless, he carves "Brooks was here" into a wooden beam before taking his own life. Meanwhile, Andy remains determined to improve the prison library. He continues writing letters to the state government, and after 6 years, his persistence pays off with a donation of $200, some old books, and records. Though the state hopes this will stop him, Andy only increases his efforts, committed to his vision. One day, a shipment arrives with books and a copy of Mozart's The Marriage of Figaro. Andy locks a guard in the bathroom and places the record over the prison's PA system. The music enchants the entire prison. Red later reflects that, for a brief moment, the women's voices made everyone feel free.
So beautiful it can't be expressed in words, and makes your heart ache.
Infuriated, Warden Norton orders Andy to turn off the music, but Andy defiantly turns up the volume. Norton has hardly break down the door, and Andy is sent to solitary confinement for 2 weeks. When he's released, Andy tells his friends that it was the easiest time he ever did because he had the music in his mind. He speaks about hope being a source of strength, but Red disagrees, saying hope is dangerous in Shawshank.
Hope can drive a man insane. It's got no use on the inside.
Andy suggests that Brooks lost hope, which angers Red. Later, Red faces another parole hearing after 30 years, but is denied once again. To mark the occasion, Andy gives Red a harmonica. In return, Red gives Andy a Marilyn Monroe poster to celebrate his 10 years at Shawshank. For years after the Mozart incident, Andy's relentless letter writing finally pays off. The state Senate grants him a $500 annual budget to expand the library. Andy renovates the space, dedicates it in Brooks' name, and turns it into the best prison library in the state. He also begins mentoring inmates, helping many earn high school diplomas to improve their chances after release. Meanwhile, Warden Norton begins exploiting Andy's financial skills. He uses prison labor to underbid contractors for public projects and accepts bribes in exchange for occasionally awarding contracts to others. Andy launders the profits through fake accounts and investments under a fictional identity, Randall Stevens, complete with forged documents. Andy once tells Red, "I had to go to prison to learn how to be a crook."
I had to come to prison to be a crook.
In 1965, a new inmate named Tommy arrives. Charismatic and likable, he quickly becomes friends with Andy and Red. After learning about Tommy's past of theft and repeated incarcerations, Andy encourages him to pursue his high school diploma. Tommy agrees and starts studying with Andy's help.
R-R-S-S-T.
Thrilled to help a youngster crawl off the shit heap.
Although discouraged after thinking he failed the exam, Andy submits it anyway. One day, Tommy learns Andy's story from Red and is stunned. He reveals that a former cellmate once bragged about killing a golfer and his lover, crimes for which a banker was wrongly convicted.
Some hotshot banker.
Andy is filled with hope and asks Warden Norton to consider a new trial using Tommy as a witness. Norton refuses, claiming Tommy is lying just to help Andy. When Andy promises not to expose Norton's money laundering operation, Norton becomes furious and throws him into solitary for a full month, the longest punishment anyone can remember. Inmates begin to suspect that Andy might truly be innocent after spending nearly 20 years in prison. Shortly afterward, Tommy receives a letter confirming that he passed his high school exam. A guard shares the news with Andy, lifting his spirits briefly in solitary. Later, Norton has Tommy brought outside at night for a private talk. When asked if he would testify for Andy, Tommy eagerly agrees. Norton then signals Hadley, who shoots Tommy dead on the spot. Norton tells Andy that Tommy was killed while trying to escape, but Andy doesn't believe him. When Andy declares he won't continue working for Norton, Norton retaliates by threatening to destroy the library, burn the books, and transfer Andy to a harsher prison block. He then adds another month to Andy's solitary confinement. After 2 months in the hole, Andy speaks to Red again, sounding weary and deeply troubled. He reflects on how much he loved his wife and admits feeling responsible for her death, even though he didn't kill her. Andy then reveals his dream: to live in Zoananale, a small beach town in Mexico, and run a hotel. He invites Red to join him someday, but Red declines, saying he's too institutionalized, just like Brooks. Red warns Andy that holding on to hope will only lead to heartbreak. Before leaving, Andy asks Red if he's familiar with the Buxton, Maine area. He describes a specific hayfield with a large oak tree at the end of a stone wall. Andy makes Red promise to visit the spot if he's ever granted parole, hinting that something is hidden there, but he doesn't say what.
You'll have to pry it up to see.
Red agrees, though he begins to worry about Andy, especially after hearing that Andy asked Haywood for a 6-foot length of rope. Red fears Andy may be planning to take his own life.
3 deposits tonight.
That night, Warden Norton tells Andy to shine his shoes and leave his suit out for dry cleaning. Andy returns to his cell, and the lights go out. Red describes it as the longest night of his life. The next morning, Andy doesn't answer during roll call. A guard checks his cell and finds it empty. Andy has vanished. An alarm is sounded. Meanwhile, Norton notices his polished shoes have been swapped and realizes something is wrong. He rushes to Andy's cell in a panic. Everything seems normal until, in frustration, he throws one of Andy's rocks at the Raquel Welch poster. It tears through the paper, revealing a tunnel behind it, just large enough for a man to crawl through.
In prison.
Through Red's narration and flashbacks, we learn that years earlier, Andy discovered the prison walls were soft enough to dig through after a piece crumbled off while he was carving his name. That discovery sparked the idea of escape. He ordered a poster of Rita Hayworth to conceal the hole. Night after night, he dug using his rock hammer, scattering the dirt during his morning walks in the yard. Andy had always kept busy, trying not to become institutionalized like Brooks. But after Tommy's murder, he decided it was time to act. On the night of a violent thunderstorm, Andy wore Norton's suit beneath his prison uniform, sealing it in a plastic bag tied to himself with a rope. No one noticed he was wearing the warden's polished shoes. He crawled through the tunnel he dug over the course of nearly 20 years and reached a sewer pipe. Timing his movements with the lightning, he broke the pipe open with a rock and crawled 500 yards through filth and waste, emerging to freedom.
Just.
The following day, searchers found Andy's prison clothes, a bar of soap, and his worn rock hammer. As guards and the warden reeled from the escape, Andy arrived at the Maine National Bank in Portland. Using the false identity of Randall Stevens, he withdrew $370,000 from accounts linked to Norton's money laundering scheme. He also sent a package to the Portland Daily Bugle containing detailed financial records in his written testimony, exposing Norton's corruption. Soon after, the Maine State Police raided Shawshank, trailed by the press. Hadley was arrested for Tommy's murder. Rumor has it he wept in the police car. The district attorney arrived with a warrant for Norton's arrest. In his office, Norton opened his safe expecting to find his ledgers, but instead found Andy's Bible. Inside it was a note: "Salvation lay within." Realizing too late, Norton opened the Bible to discover the pages of Exodus had been hollowed out to hide Andy's rock hammer. As the police closed in, Norton took a revolver from his desk and ended his life. Red wonders whether Norton, in his final moments, understood how thoroughly Andy had outsmarted him. Not long after, Red receives a blank postcard from Fort Hancock, Texas. He takes it as a sign that Andy made it to Mexico. Though the inmates share stories of Andy's great escape with admiration, Red begins to feel his absence deeply. He sinks into quiet sadness.
I guess I just miss my friend.
At his 1967 parole hearing, Red no longer tries to charm the board. He dismisses the term rehabilitation as meaningless and speaks honestly about his regret, not to earn parole, but because he finally understands the weight of his past. Moved by his sincerity, the board grants his release. Red is sent to live and work at the same halfway house where Brooks once stayed. He notices the carving Brooks left behind. At times, Red feels so lost that he considers breaking parole just to return to the familiarity of prison. But he remembers his promise to Andy. Instead of walking into the pawn shop to look at guns, he buys a compass and sets out on his journey. He hitchhikes to Buxton, finds the stone wall, and locates the black rock Andy described. Underneath, he discovers a small box with cash and a letter inviting him to join Andy in Mexico for a new project. Andy doesn't say where exactly, but Red feels a spark of hope. After carving Brooks was here, so was Red. Into a wooden beam, Red breaks parole and leaves the halfway house. He's confident no one will bother chasing down an old convict. Red takes a bus to Fort Hancock and crosses the border into Mexico. On a quiet beach by the Pacific, he finds Andy working on an old boat. They see each other and embrace, finally free and reunited.